News just coming in. Indian Air Force has written to the kin of those on board the missing AN-32 aircraft. The Air Force has given up hope, has asked the kin to accept their demise. Indian Air Force will formally announce suspension of search and rescue operations. We have Indrajit Kundu on the phone line with us from Kolkata. Also, Shivarur, who's with us live from our newsroom. Indrajit, I want to come to you first. The Indian Air Force now expected to formally approach all the members who've lost their family members on board that AN-32 aircraft, telling them that they're giving over their search.
Well, that's right, because they have already made a correspondence to the families of those who were on board that ill-fated flight, as we have a copy of the letter that has been sent by the IAF to several of these officers. And it clearly says that the hope of any chances of survival at this point does not exist. And they say that there was a court of inquiry that was conducted by the Air Force Station at Sulu. And the court of inquiry did take into consideration all the evidence that had been gathered by the massive SAR operation, a search and rescue operation that was conducted by the Indian Navy and the Air Force together, along with the Coast Guard in the Bay of Bengal since July 22nd, when this AN-32 aircraft went missing. And the evidence that was gathered by the search team was not conclusive. Even the international support that was given to the Indian Air Force and the Indian Navy, that could not lead to any breakthrough. And therefore, now that 2 months have passed by, the Indian Air Force wants to communicate to these families that there is no more chances of survival, and therefore they have requested these families to sign on the presumption of death certificate and to begin the process of a formal process of closing down this entire search operation, and so that there is the legal process that starts for compensation to be paid to all these 29 family members.
Indrajit, stay on with us. Let's also get in a word from Shivarur. Shiv, a heartbreaking moment for families of those officers who were on board that AN-32 aircraft. These families, of course, had been hoping against hope that there would be some good news, but after 2 months, it was unlikely.
That is correct, Simi. This was inevitable to many. The fact that that aircraft going missing a month after search operations, very extensive, one of the largest ever search operations by India, would end with this terrible news. But now it's been made formal, and we've got that letter that the Air Force has written a copy of. One such letter. 29 such letters were written last month to the 29 families of those on board that aircraft that is still currently missing in the Bay of Bengal. And I just want to read out this last paragraph, because this is where the Assistant Chief of Air Staff at Air Force Headquarters says, "It is with deep regret that I wish to inform you that our efforts to establish the whereabouts of the aircraft and the missing personnel on board have so far proved unsuccessful. It is with a feeling of profound sadness that the Court of Inquiry has recommended that your son be presumed to have been fatally injured." So this is a formal letter that the Air Force has written, dated the 24th of August, over a month after the aircraft actually went missing, about 20 days ago, informing all of those families that their kin may now be officially presumed dead. Terribly tragic, but in many ways inevitable, Simi, because this was an enormous operation. 201 search missions conducted by submarine, aircraft, ship, divers also in the Bay of Bengal. International satellites were used. In many ways, this was an enormous search operation, the complexity of which India has never actually embarked upon. And the fact that 2 months later, nearly 2 months later, the aircraft still hasn't been found is, I think, sort of testimony to the fact that India has tried its very best to find those 29 personnel, but the Air Force, a professional service, knows that the worst actually has happened and conveyed that now to the families.
And Shiv, we've been tracking this story ever since that aircraft first went missing. During the search, was there any moment where it looked like there was a possibility of some of those people being traced alive?
There were, a couple of blips, Simi. That's a very good question. There were a couple of moments during the search operation, especially in early August, when, some kinds of debris were found. There were oil slicks found in the Bay of Bengal. But, you know, even with all of that news, it was already confirmed that the aircraft went down. There was no possibility of the aircraft having landed somewhere. It was always certain that the aircraft had gone down. So even though you know, everyone knew the worst had happened, it had become a hunt for where the aircraft went down. You know, because the urgency and the imperative was to find the debris of the aircraft so that the families of those 29 people on board could get some peace and closure. Sadly, this letter basically imputes that you can presume them dead because the search for that aircraft is proving a gargantuan task, and that aircraft might not actually be found. Technically speaking, despite this massive search effort, the Air Force will continue in some way to look for that aircraft, but for all practical purposes, the search for those 29 people is over.
Shivanindraji, thanks so much for those details. We're going to keep coming back to you for more reactions, especially from family members. The Indian Air Force to formally announce suspension of search and rescue operations of the missing AN-32 aircraft.